Taylor Hudak from Action for Assange is here, everybody. Let us... All right, so Taylor, why don't you tell everybody where you're at and what just happened?
Yeah, so I am in D.C. right now at the National Press Club, and the Courage Foundation hosted an event where they had a panel of attorneys and legal experts discuss the legal ramifications of the prosecution of Julian Assange. And it was a very sophisticated panel of legal experts. Among them was Edward Snowden's attorney, Ben Weisner. So it was very interesting to be able to speak with him and hear his insight on this case, and specifically about this new field of journalism, an emerging field of journalism, being national security journalism. National security journalism? Yes.
So before we get into national security, why don't you just give everybody kind of the broad strokes of what the National Press Club is? It's not really a bunch of indie YouTubers over there, right?
It is not. In fact, keep in mind, I'm still here, but that's okay.
Say what you can, considering where you're standing. Don't get yourself in trouble.
Right. So, this is definitely a place that I would say fosters more corporate media voices. In fact, a man behind me was with the Washington Post.
Oh, boy.
And he was the only, he asked a question. I'm sure there were other journalists of more mainstream media organizations present, but I know for a fact that the Washington Post was here. And typically these organizations, not just this one, but typically they are meant to foster, help, and elevate more corporate media journalists.
Okay. So that's what the National Press Club is for our listeners or viewers right now. And so now... What did anything? So they're talking about what you call it, national intelligence media?
Yeah, they talked about national security journalism. Basically, so that would put you in mind of Glenn Greenwald's work.
Did they mention what's happening to him in Brazil?
The work of WikiLeaks. That was not mentioned this evening. I think they wanted to keep the focus on just Julian Assange, and actually. The focus wasn't even on whistleblowers. It was very specific to Julian. There was some mention of Chelsea Manning as well, because it is the leaks that she provided that are ultimately led to Julian being charged, and she's very interconnected in this case as well. So she was mentioned. But just for the viewers who are listening, national security journalism really began to take its own value after 9/11, and national security law really wasn't much of a thing until 9/11 happened. It really changed our world even in that sense. And Edward Snowden's attorney made a very interesting point, and he said that national security journalism often looks like a crime because you have one person, the journalist, that has to persuade another individual, the leaker, the whistleblower, to provide them with information, thus committing a felony. And the laws right now are very wishy-washy as to exactly what that looks like and what is permissible under the law. And the concerns tonight were that the Julian Assange case is not the case to be setting the precedent.
Wow. So, I mean, what was the overall sense you got from this panel? Do you feel like it was just sort of some corporate media, intelligence community, like lip service or whitewashing? Or do you think they were actually trying to get at the root of this? And like, were they asking for the pardoning and the freedom of Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning? Was anyone saying that?
Nobody explicitly said that. However, I do want to acknowledge that the Courage Foundation was created by Julian Assange and others involved with WikiLeaks, I believe, and that organization does wonderful work. So I want to get that out before I comment on your question. The Courage Foundation is a fantastic entity, and they have really helped some very courageous and heroic people. That being said, on the panel, there was some disinformation that was being said, and that was specifically about Julian Assange and the retraction of names. One of the attorneys who worked for the DOJ, I believe, or a government entity similar to that, made the mistake of saying that Julian Assange failed to retract the names of informants or people in documents, when in reality that is not the case. It was journalists at The Guardian who failed to do so, and a person in the audience actually corrected this misstatement, which I thought was really important to do. But I was surprised that even people who are legal experts were still repeating disinformation.
Well, I'm not, because my guess is that person was deliberately trying to do that and then got caught. That's my guess. Is they had someone on that panel like, here, make sure you sprinkle some of this information in there to make, because we were just talking about it on the live stream earlier today. Someone was like, how come they haven't just flat out killed Julian Assange? And I think there'd be too much of a revolt if that happened. So what they're trying to do, what the American empire is trying to do, is get him on trial and look guilty, so enough of the American people go, Julian's it was treason what he did, and that's the message they're trying to paint, which is why I wouldn't doubt it if a DOJ lawyer was deliberately on that panel to spread that out there. I mean, I'm glad there was someone in the audience that pointed it out, but I bet you that was deliberate. Did you hear any other sort of misinformation that was put out there by the panel?
No, I did not hear any other misinformation that seemed to stand out for me. Now, when I go and look back at the footage, I will point it out if I do see it. Again, I was taking notes during this time in filming this, which I will be uploading later tonight. But I do want to make a point to say that the people in the audience were very supportive of Julian Assange. I spoke with people afterwards. I spoke with Julian Assange's attorney, Barry Pollock. I spoke with Edward Snowden's attorney. And those individuals were very much supportive of Julian Assange and freeing him. And I wish I was able to get it on my phone, but I stood up and I asked a question, and I did say I want to take a moment right now to condemn the corporate media for misrepresenting this case. I want to condemn the corporate media for not talking about Julian Assange enough, and I want to condemn them for repeating CIA talking points. And I could feel the hostility fostering among the panelists, and I thought, oh no, and then after that, and I said, free Assange, and everybody started clapping, and then it was just very tense. And then after that, they said, one more question and we're done. So,
wow. So you shut the panel down. This all be recorded.
Yeah.
Well, good for you for asking.
I had to stand up and say that. And I had to. It was a good opportunity to do so. So.
That's awesome that you did that, Taylor. So what else did you sort of take away from this panel and some of the interviews you got with people afterwards?
Yeah. So also what was discussed was the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge, which was the first charge against Julian Assange. And then after that, they piled on all the espionage charges. And many members of the panel were saying that they felt extradition would be much easier for the United States if they only charged him with the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. Many people on the panel expressed a belief, and there was 4 of them, so I would say about 3 of the 4, or two of the 4, made the point to say that this was a ridiculous charge, and Edward Snowden's attorney said specifically that it was incoherent, and he said that this is done, he was charged with this because it separates Julian Assange's activities from those of a journalist. And that is the perception that they wanted to make, and people believe that. However, in reality, journalists commit this type of offense all the time now, being in a digital age, and that this is something that happens all the time. And so there was some concern there, of course, and it was 2 attorneys in particular that were very concerned about the precedent that in itself will set for other journalists. And then there was also discussion, too, about mainstream media and corporate media's failure to really connect with Julian Assange and want to distance themselves from him. And they said that this charge was a way to help facilitate that. And many mainstream media journalists saw that charge as like, oh, that is something I would never do. I would never help leaker conceal their identity. I would never do that. So they were able to accept that, him being charged with that crime.
Wow. That's fascinating. But it's good to hear that the overall tone of the audience was pro Julian Assange and wanting him freed. Did you encounter any sort of, I mean, I know you've done work with Susie Dawson and the One versus Five Eyes and you've tracking the sort of private intelligence and JTRIG. Did you feel like or notice there was anybody there like that trying to be disruptive or deliberately keeping things off track or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No, not in the audience. No, not in the audience. I didn't notice anybody trying to disrupt anything, not at all. But that's a really good question. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I have to actually think about it tells me that there wasn't any of that, because I would have been able to probably pick up on it quite quickly. Mm-hmm. But the audience was very supportive. And many members of the audience I could tell were a little bit frustrated when that falsehood was repeated, being the retraction of names falsehood, that Julian Assange didn't retract names.
Right.
When he did.
Yeah, it was the Guardian. Yeah. So what else did you get from this? Yeah,
just being there at first, I felt a little bit overwhelmed in a good sense, because I thought, okay, here we are at the National Press Club in the nation's capital, and there's a panel of legal experts. I mean, these are high-profile attorneys who took time to prepare for this event, who wanted to participate in it, and who are taking part in this. And it showed me that this is extremely, extremely serious. I mean, I already knew that, but the fact that this event was being held amplified that belief in me, because for a while there, I tried reaching out to press clubs and they failed to issue statements. They said they would discuss it with their sponsors, which were big corporations, and that was the Press Club of Cleveland in particular. And they came back to me and said, we won't issue a statement in support of Julian Assange because his what happens to him will not ultimately impact the lives of local journalists, which I told them that was absolutely not true. And I tried to explain to them in Cleveland why that wasn't the case, and they just never responded back to me.
So in the several years that you've been tracking the Assange case and doing action for Assange and working with Susie Dawson, do you view this, the press club even having this panel and talking about it and meeting Edward Snowden's lawyer and Julian Assange's lawyer, do you think like this is actually a step in the right direction? Like it is kind of maybe the mainstream corporate media is kind of waking up to the realities that if Julian Assange gets arrested, they could get arrested?
Well, first of all, I haven't been doing this for years. It's actually been coming up on a year now, I believe.
Okay.
Action for Assange isn't a year old yet. We started in June.
Okay.
I know I'm talking about it as if it's like a real entity, but we've been around for less than a year.
Okay.
But
you personally have also been tracking this yourself for how long?
I have. Probably about 2 years now. This is coming up on 2 years. Yeah. So you were asking about if I think the corporate media is picking up on the fact that this could impact them. I think that some may have when the espionage charges were filed against him. I think that's when people started to see that there's a problem here, but not nearly enough. And I'm still a little disheartened to see, even on outlets that claim to be progressive and I think do pretty good work otherwise, still repeating mainstream talking points just a little over a year ago. I find that very problematic, and just going down the line, and then also laughing at Julian's situation, that he's been detained. He was detained for 7 years, and making fun of that. So it's really on independent media to step up and to not be repeating mainstream media talking points. Even if you're not independent media, even if you are owned by a big corporation, you still have an obligation to the truth, and you have an obligation to not be providing people with disinformation.
Okay. All right. Well, any final thoughts before we let you go?
Yes, I do have some final thoughts, and that is to, I will be, so for everybody that is listening right now, I will be posting tonight today's event and what happened, and I'll have interviews posted, and I will have footage so you could hear what they were saying and see it and all of that. So do be watching for that. I will put that on Action for Assange. And then also, too, do put pressure on the candidates to speak about this issue. Do it in a polite way, please. You will not get your way if you're rude about it. And I know that nobody would be rude about it, but I just want to make that clear that you get what you want by being assertive, firm, and also rational.
You attract more bees with honey than you do vinegar, Taylor. It's something my grandmother always said.
Right. And then lastly, too, if you do see disinformation in media, in any media, if that's independent or corporate media, it is your obligation to point that out to them. And I would say do it in the same way that you would with a politician. Point it out in a polite and respectful way, and just tell them you expect much better from them and that you believe that they will be on the right side of this issue, because everybody is in the media is going to be impacted by this in some way, and it needs to be talked about, and especially now that we are approaching this full extradition hearing next month.
Yeah, so the full extradition hearing starts February 24th. I believe you and one other person from Action for Assange are going to be there covering it. Is that correct?
That is correct. Myself and Steve Poikinen of Slow News Day Show are going to be covering this, and we have some things planned, some people we will be connecting with, and we are going to be covering it from outside of the courthouse. We never intended to be in the courthouse. That can't happen, and that'll be for people that are close to Julian and people that really need to be in there. So we won't be in the courthouse. We will be reporting from outside and talking about what's going on outside of the courtroom. And then, of course, updating people on what decisions are being made and all of this sort of legal actions that can be taken if this is following a normal procedure and all of that.
Yes, I was hoping to go, but I'm not going to be able to. But to all of our viewers and listeners, we will be, and hopefully we can get Skype to work. But we'll have Taylor Skype in from London with updates from the court case. But one of the things that this pertains to, and we'll talk about this before you go, we also know a whistleblower journalist, Susie Dawson, who is living in Russia right now, trying to seek asylum, and she could use some help. She has give us the website and the letter that people can sign.
Yes. So go to protectsusie.com/open letter and sign the open letter. This goes to NGOs and other organizations who can help her and her case in seeking asylum. She really needs our help. Susie is a fantastic journalist and has revealed some really, really astonishing truths about the intelligence community, and has really worked on behalf of the people. So do support her. If you can, do donate if you can. If you cannot, that's fine. Not everybody can, but circulating that link is really important. And also, too, I want to make sure that I'm not seeming to be too harsh on independent media, because I want to acknowledge that there are some people that are doing a fantastic job talking about this issue. That's Jimmy Dore, that's you, Graham, of course, Ron, and also the Combo Couch, too, who has been consistently asking these candidates about Julian Assange and making a real effort to do so. And I appreciate that so much, and it's so important.
Thank you.
There are people that are doing some really good stuff.
Outstanding, Taylor. Thank you so much for being it's our first ever field reporter on the Political Vigilante. This is fantastic. We couldn't figure out the video, but we got to do this over the phone. And thank you so much. And everybody, please check out Action for Assange and follow their Twitter. And they do a live vigil weekly every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Check that out. Taylor, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification button. Even if you've done it before, YouTube is undoing that, and they're unsubscribing people. Make sure you're subscribed. Share the videos out on your social media. Support what we're doing at patreon.com/Graham Elwood, rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, and come see Ron Placone and I on the road for the Progressive Comedy Tour. February, we're in Tucson. and San Francisco. March, we are in Florida, Orlando, Tampa, and Miami. April, we are in Seattle and Portland, Oregon. And May, we are in Indianapolis, Detroit, and Cleveland. All my tour dates are at grahamelwood.com. We're probably coming to a city near you. Join us. You show up alone, you leave a part of a community.